Hello humans. Hello humans. September the 4th. I think even reasonably early in the morning out here on the coast. It's cold, it's getting colder. It's theoretically going to rain tomorrow. This is good for me personally because we've been under a burn ban all through the summer because of the extraordinary dryness, which is artificial in my opinion, induced by the chemtrails chemically or something. But in any event, so maybe we'll be able to go out and do outdoor cooking again, you know, the burn ban and everything. So the rain is going to be good, but decidedly we have gotten into the cold period. I think it was the beginning of the second week in August that the Pacific current out here along the coast actually turned. And the intercoastal current switches from north to south. So it's going from, instead of going towards the north, it's now going towards the south here as part of the shift into fall. It always does it ahead of the equinox. It seems a little early to me for it to be happening in that part of August. Usually I'm aware of it by the end of August, but I don't think I've been aware of it that early before. Anyway, though, that's just an aside. There's a lot of them today. It's one of those falling woo days. And it's all about UKEMI, all right? And so UKEMI is the art of falling. This is a vital part of martial arts. It's not simply, you know, falling over splat. It's not like that. This is a studied, strategized, tactically sliced and analyzed and diced approach to things. So UKEMI is more than simply the art of how to fall down. It is how to fall down without injuring yourself, how to fall down without injuring others, how to master the art of falling down such that your injuries don't accumulate over time, how to fall softly, how to fall hard when you need to, how to fall to good advantage. And that's where we are at now. That's the ultimate, that's the pinnacle in terms of mastery. And I'm a good UKEMIist, right? This is a part of martial arts. And so when I was a kid, I got beat up when I was 11. Got the holy shit beat out of me by a guy who had reach. And I didn't have reach and I didn't know how to fight. So he just beat the crap out of me. My dad didn't want to be messing with that, so he threw me in with this Japanese master sergeant who taught judo. And he took one look at me and he said, "Kid, you're just too thin." I was too thin, right? I didn't have any muscle mass at age 11. And so he said, "I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to throw you. You're going to become an UKEMI master," right? I was not a master. I mean, initially I was an intern even. But so for the first year in judo, I practiced no judo moves, right? I ate and I exercised and I learned to fall so that I didn't injure myself. Or others, as I say. Now, my instructor, Hai, his name was Hai, H-I, that's his first name. He was Japanese, he was a true Budo master, he was in the military, he's a master sergeant. He was really tough, but he was very smart about these things. And so he instructed me in the philosophy of falling every time he threw me, okay? And so that was my job. I would show up at judo, I'd put on my gi, I'd do the exercises, work out with everybody, get a good sweat going. And I was the shrimp in the room, right? There are a lot of servicemen there. This was a judo class for everybody. He didn't discriminate, but he took me because of who my dad was. But I was the youngest there by about 4 years. So there was somebody there about 15 or 16. Anyway, though, so what they did was every time they practiced, they would practice very slowly with me because I didn't weigh much. And so it was easy for them to manipulate me into these complex judo throws and for me to thus learn how to fall safely, as well as as what it felt like to be handled in that way relative to the potential to then fall. And so I was very good at getting out of it. At the end of that year, even high could not throw me if I decided not to be thrown, right? Because I was that slippery at that stage. I could rotate, flip around. We're talking old style Kano Judo, which is, actually it was Kano Jiu-Jitsu that he taught. Okay, so before it became the judo player arts in the Olympics, before that period, it was Kano Jiu-Jitsu. Kano's the guy that formalized it all. He's Vladimir Putin's hero. Anyway, though, so I was for a year. I did UKEMI. That's all I did. And then I started learning various different throwing moves and so on, and grappling arts and so forth. But even so, didn't have much mass. But at the end of the year, I'd gained some mass and some muscle and kind of knew what I was doing. But I was exceptionally good at being thrown, and I could throw and be thrown and roll, pop right back up. And so I was at that point where I had I tasted what it felt like to be able to roll to good advantage, to fall to good advantage, to be an UKEMI adept, okay? I had it in me at that stage because of massive body repetition, because bear in mind, I would go to judo like 3 nights a week, and I might be thrown 70 or 80 times in that period of time. No damage, no concussions, none of that. Separated a toe once, but in little nicks and cuts kind of thing, mat scrapes, burns, those sorts of things, but no damage because I was instructed in how to fall safely. And you could pretty much pick me up and throw me across the room and I would fall safely. In fact, this came in really handy once. A side diversion story here. So I'm in the baby boom generation. When I got to the point where I got married very young and I needed to earn a living, I tried to do anything to get employment. There was just no employment in the area. We're not in a position to move to seek work. So I had to really scramble for jobs for the period of time right after Nixon took us off the gold standard. It crashed the economy and there was just no work anywhere. So I tried all different kinds of things to get jobs, right? One of the things I tried out for was to be a sheriff, to be a deputy sheriff, right? It was a little dodgy at the time. I have authority issues. It was something I didn't want to do, but it was really actually the only thing going at that time in this area was to either get into law enforcement or get into local state government, and it was hard to get into local state government if you weren't an accomplished typist at the entry level because there was very basically nothing else. And all of the slots that had been that were available to men in that environment were pretty much filled up because there were so many of the baby boomers trying to get work at that point, right? It was one of those crushing periods of time where they had unemployment extensions and all different kinds of things going just to keep young men off the street and causing trouble. Unlike today, where they're out there on the street and causing trouble. Anyway, though, so I tried out for the deputy sheriffs, and I aced the test in many regards and really impressed the fuck out of them, all of the people there, because they had this physical fitness thing that you had to go through. And I was in real good shape at that point, not as good as I was when I was in my 40s, but I was in good shape and could do this stuff and knew how to fall. And they had a old style solid pommel horse, the tall kind, that you would do the hand exercises on. And but the not the ones with the legs, but the ones that have a solid side are solid all the way around. And you can do extra kinds of gymnastics on them. Anyway, and so those things are tall, and they'd headed up, so you had to cross this 6-foot-high barrier. And they didn't care how you did it. And they had mats all around it. It was padded so that you couldn't hurt yourself, but all this shit was timed. You had to go and it was an obstacle course. They even had you go and like sniff these jars and write down what you smelled because they were testing everything, right? You had to be able to, so one of them was peanut butter and the other was vinegar or something. One of them was for sure peanut butter, but I don't remember the other one. Anyway, though, so well, I impressed the fuck out of these guys because it's like, oh, well, shit, I can jump over that. And the 6-foot-high thing, especially since they had a little sloping ramp And I'd been doing a lot of Aikido at that point, right? And so, or just started really getting into it at that point. And so I ran at the thing and got right up there and sort of jumped right over it, sailed over it, and of course, I know how the fuck to roll. And so they could not see, the guys who were judging all of this, they were idiots the way they set this course up. And I knew that this was the case. I was an asshole, okay, so I was a bit of a butthead. This was in a gymnasium over at St. Martin's College, which is out in Lacey, Washington. And they'd had it for the day for the sheriff's test for the county. And so I jumped over the pommel horse, which they couldn't see through, and I knew they couldn't see me once I got over. There were like 2 other people that had gone ahead of me, or maybe 3 other people that had gone ahead of me. One woman really struggled to get over the thing, flopping herself over like a dead fish kind of an approach, right? This other guy who was about the size of a bear sort of waddled his fat all the way over it. And so these were not really, great barriers to achievement to overcome. And so it kind of floored them that I just sailed over it and then disappeared, because I knew what I was doing. I did this quick turn in midair, so I ducked myself back on the other side of the thing and just scooted out on my hands and knees to the hallway, came back, and then came in on the side. And they're all, whoa, where'd he go? And then I'm right here. They expected to see me stand up and then walk back and stuff, right? That was the last obstacle in this thing. Anyway, though, so UKEMI has practical jokester uses as well. The part of the UKEMI arts, just as an aside, is that you can twist your body in midair and do interesting things. And you see people do this in high dives, right? Where they do the high dives and they spin and they do all that kind of stuff. You can do that moving horizontally if someone throws you. And you rarely, if you go and look at all the people fighting Antifa and all of this kind of stuff, all the street battles that are going on these days, you rarely see people that know how to fall. It was exceptional. The other day I saw a guy that knew how to fall in one of these videos in which, I think it was an Antifa versus somebody video, and this guy was, it was in the anti-vax protest in London. And this guy, he was bald, reasonably thin, middle-aged, and he got in the way. Okay, so there were a bunch of police, and this one woman was she was a purple hair woman, and she was pretty large, and she was just grabbing the police, like grabbing them on the shoulder, just pulling these guys down, just pulling them one right after the other like this. And this guy from the crowd behind her comes around this way. He was going to contend with some other police guy. He got in her way, and she just apparently just saw him peripherally, grabbed his shoulder here across her arm and threw him that way. And he literally just goes flying. And all this is being filmed from a guy who's got his camera, his phone behind the woman that's peeling the cops out of this big pile. And anyway, so this poor guy goes flying through the air, and the fellow with the camera who was taking it, he was taken by this guy's acrobatics or aerobatics, and so he followed him with the camera. So we got to see him land, and he was good. He landed, and there were these other policemen that were trying to kettle this guy and arrest him, and he landed on them. And he apparently saw them coming, and I saw him turn his body. So he's sailing along horizontally, and he turns his body so that when he crashed into the cops, he didn't hit him on his chest. He came in on his back and sort of sailed in like that, and then got up and ran like fuck. So anyway, he'd done that shit before, or it was a native talent. Anyway, so this is all about falling down, right? And falling down woo, and the art of falling, and how to fall to best advantage. And so we're in war now. It's difficult to describe this war to people, but they're seeing more and more of it bust out. Normies are now starting to become aware of it. The more awake, right-leaning, conservative-leaning minds are not necessarily, in my opinion, really completely aware of the extent of the woo. But even these people are in a position of now seeing a war develop in a way that they had not anticipated. So devolution is part of the war. Okay, devolution is not the goal of the war. Devolution is not the single tactic or single strategy. It is a dominant strategy. It is a pivotal strategy. It is a puncturing strategy and an appropriate one. And it is pivotal for us in going into the future. But it's not the overall thing. Just like this is not about Trump. This is about all elections going forward in all countries. This is about bringing the republic back. This war is about so much more than merely the personality that is Trump, or the personality that is Trump as he occupied that role as president. Okay, so the framing of it as a spiritual war, good versus evil, is appropriate. It aids us in a lot of ways to think about things that way, but it's also limiting because of the nature of the war itself. So we have this idea of good versus evil. Our problem is at the moment that all of our imagery of this spiritual war is tainted. And so we have this good versus evil, and our problem is that our images, which frame our thinking, has been controlled. And so if you have a thought about the wider spiritual war, basically no matter what your personal relationship to the materium and universe is, you will have images that have been put in your head by half of this battle, because this half over here had no need to provide images, frameworks, controls, etc., etc. Because these images, while they frame your thoughts, they do exactly that. They keep you from thinking outside the frame relative to this particular situation. And so, in that sense, we see that Sun Tzu's statement, all war is deception. And there's only deception in war. That's seriously appropriate and really frames, it states where we are at relative to the framing of the battles that we're actually participating in. And so this is important. This is a very key aspect of things, because in falling to good advantage, in the art of falling to good advantage, such that you roll in a good advantage to the opponent that would then be rushing out to do you further harm, right? So that you not only get thrown, you know you're going to get thrown, it doesn't matter, he's a bigger guy, and you use this to your advantage as he's picking you up and sailing you over, and he's a big guy in a bar or whatever, and he picks you up and he's going to throw you, two-handed throw, and maybe he weighs 100 pounds more than you, so he's got the good leverage. Well, as he's throwing you, you just clip his jaw with your foot as he lets you go. You don't do it before he lets you go, because then he might take you straight down, right? And you guard yourself with your hands and so on. And then as you let go, you fall in such a way that you twist to come up facing him instantly, right? Ready to repel any attacks, and he's already a bit dazed. Also, you can attack at that point. Hit him from the other side, these sorts of things. So this is falling to good advantage. This is falling as a strategy and a tactic in survival, because all warfare is about personal survival, collective survival. And that's where we're at now. This is ultimate survival. This is a war that we cannot linguistically overstate. It may appear that way now. It may appear that we're using hyperbolic statements, that we're making extreme analogies and metaphors for what's going on. But in a very short period of time, it will become very apparent to almost everyone, that that is not the case, that indeed we're at a really remarkable time in history, in human history. A time that I find difficult to describe adequately, to get across the magnitude and momentous nature of this time, right? The war is about anything you care to name. It's about all the gold on the planet, all the riches, access to space, the royals on the planet, all their evil crimes, all of the powers that be and their evil crimes. It's about the freedom of humanity. It's about humans being able to grow personally and develop in ways that have been restricted from us for so long. It's about recovering our history, finding out what they know, what the powers that be know that has been hidden. What about all of the stuff that's buried in the Smithsonian that they just don't want to admit about? They don't want to talk it. It's about all of that. We're at that point in this good versus evil battle that the UKEMI arts are starting to show themselves. So devolution is UKEMI. It's being able to fall back to good advantage, right? Military parlance, it's an organized retreat, or it's a deceptive retreat, or it's a feinting retreat. All of these different kinds of retreats that you can do. So for instance, I saw a recent street battle here between cops and Antifa in London, and it was like, the police, I'm sorry, you guys are using such poor tactics, because it would have been so easy to deal with these guys. First off, the Antifa had a long banner, right, that they were holding. It's about 3 feet. It's a big chunk of cloth that had a bunch of stuff printed on it, and their slogans, whatever. And it was long. It was maybe 30 feet or more, and a bunch of them were holding it up. And it was thick enough cloth that it didn't bunch up. It fell down, and it was about 3 feet wide, yard wide. And so all the cops had to do was a couple of them get on each end of that banner, take it away from the Antifa on the end, and then come in at each other, and they're all corralled. The Antifa actually lassoed themselves if the cops had the smarts to take advantage of it. So they're just, and of course the beautiful way to do that is with your UKEMI arts, because the police were pushing all the Antifa on the banner. All they really had to do was to part in the middle, let Antifa push naturally into that void, and the Antifa in there would naturally wrap themselves up in their little banner thing, and you could just tie them up in a little bow and roll them down the street. The Antifa are so stupid in how they do things. Anyway, though, the UKEMI arts and where we're at right at the moment. So we've got a huge battle going on. It's breaking out now. You're going to see a lot of activity come out relative to the powers that be as the falling back as the UKEMI progresses. Because what's going on is that there are points of contention that are being set up between the self-organizing collective that's running devolution and the powers that be. And the powers that be are continually pushing. And they're having a hard time, because what's happening is that the people that are offering resistance resist and then fall back, resist and then fall back, resist and then fall back. Every time they do this, the powers that be rush on up and get bigger, okay? they become more aggressive. And then the falling back, they become more aggressive. Each and every one of these times, we have a reaction within the populace as they see the activities of the powers that be more. So this is a thing about educating the normies. Now, true, the people that are resisting are going to be doing things in an active, dynamic fashion now. We're in that period of dynamism in the war. So there's going to be, so in war, everybody moves all of their equipment. There's all this logistics. It takes fucking forever getting people and guns and all this shit on boats and sending them here and all that kind of stuff, right? And then it takes you forever to get them off the boat and get them set up, get everybody fed and get everybody's gear to them and get them assigned tents and all of this kind of stuff, right? And so it takes forever at that part. And then one day, the shooting starts. And then you have that dynamic activity. All the other is really the dynamic activity, and that's just the end part. The shooting part is the end. It's the rest of it that is really the war. And we're in the rest of it at the moment. And but we're into this dynamic phase of the rest of it because now we're starting to shove all of our people into boats and get everything together so that we can shove them overseas and, you know, and start the assaults. In fact, we're actually starting the assaults. And in this case, we're doing this is all psychological warfare, and the psychological warfare is coming out now. It's coming out in the form of the Epstein material, the 37 terabytes of just disgusting, disgusting material. At some point, they'll actually have documents in there, and then I'll delve back into it. I'm not interested in watching these videos of these people and their perverted actions. A lot of people need to see that, but I don't. And they're coming out there. We're seeing other psychological, media-driven aspects of this war as the SOC, this self-organizing collective that's fighting the powers that be, starts releasing information about the minions. And so basically at this stage, it's the let's expose all of the minions and how corrupt they are and why they are where they're at. And so this next phase that we're getting into here, and I'll take this off and we'll get into some stuff here about our UKEMI. So our guys, the SOCs, are falling back. They're falling back, but every time they fall back, the powers that be rush into a prepared trap. And so it's going to keep going like this and get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so our SOC here is releasing material on the MSM. And so this is going to be for, we can just say SOC September. All right, so over September, we're going to see, and into October, we're going to see more and more material about the mainstream media. Mainstream media is a pivotal linchpin here for the powers that be. If the mainstream media goes away, Klaus Schwab, Bill Gates, the Pope, Biden, if the mainstream media goes away, what is Biden? Absolutely fucking nothing, because nobody's going to listen to him or pay any attention to him at all. You see this on his own numbers, and he gets ratioed even in these abysmal numbers. So in this sense, we know that we're in a dynamic period of time because the MSM, the dirt's starting to come up. And it's going to get really ugly, and it's going to continue getting ugly to the point where it won't be able to be ignored. Nor will the people that they're exposing, they won't be able to ignore the exposure. There will have to be responses, both in the form of officialdom of the organizations around the MSM, around the individuals, and then from the individuals themselves. And so we might see some media people be exposed in some of their crimes that decide, well, I'm going to sue and claim it's all defamation and so forth. Really dumb move. But we may indeed see that. The suit, I don't think, will continue because it'll have to happen way in October and beyond, and things are going to get a lot more interesting in this period of time. There are reasons to suspect, okay, because I don't know what day it actually happened. It might have happened in August, but at some point we went to Cogon 2. That's like Def Condition 2. Cogon 2. these things have, there's 5 of them. So you start off with continuity of government, 5, and then 4. So if things are getting nasty, it goes down to 3, and then if it gets even nastier, it goes to 2. We're at 2 now. We're at 2 now in September. Might have happened in late August. I don't pay attention to this. I just had somebody tell me the other day in passing that, oh, hey, it happened. And I said, okay, cool. Now I'm aware. You know, I basically allow universe to tell me that these things occur. Now I'm going to pay attention because we've only got one more number to go. When we go to 1, then things are extremely active. At the point of going to 1, it won't make any difference that they've gone to 1 insofar as my understanding, because everything will be active all around me, and things will be popping off and change will be unfolding massively. But so people say, well, there's no proof of devolution, which is not true at all. There's vast quantities of proof of devolution if you want to go and look. Not merely the Q material. And the Q material maps to the United States Department of Defense Law of War Manual, especially chapters 18 and some of the others. But it maps to that, especially the last quarter of the Q drops. There's a couple of people out there with large proofs. I think the guy calls himself Magic Eyes or something. I don't know, but I'll dig it up and post it at some point. Yes, I had been hassled on Twitter the other day, but it was for old tweets, which was like, wait a second. These tweets were, 20, 30 days old. So what's going on there? Anyway, over the course of September, our SOC is going to dump on the mainstream media. Over the course of September, we're going to get the potential for the deep state to respond with communications blackouts. They're prepping for that now in some of the verbiage that they've got out there. So they're talking about how the internet is not hardened to, it's in a Forbes magazine article. They use these things to let you know what's coming, and this is how they communicate with their minions too, is through these media. Anyway, so there's an article about how the sun's becoming unruly, and the power system is hardened against it, but the internet is not. And so the internet may have troubles, meaning communications blackout. And you'll have to rely on mainstream media, TV. No, not going to buy any of the shit that's coming out of them. So for communications, I've got one here, a ham radio. I've got an antenna, should I decide to set it up. There's a reason not to set it up ahead of time, not only for exposure in case it becomes illegal to have such things, but also because in the case of solar outputs, your antenna becomes very vulnerable. It can be really damaged. And I wasn't going to mess with the ham radio in any event until some need showed up. Also, you can have little transistor radios. Because of the nature of software and computers and power amplifiers and stuff, it's my assumption that we will have a communications platform. If the internet was totally screwed, we would find ourselves in a situation where there would be basically pirate, unlicensed radio stations popping up all over as people put these things together, because software being broadcast, or radio being broadcast through software, through computer, is relatively easy to do these days. Okay, so communications are going to be a problem in September. I personally don't have anything in my data sets for emotional spikes or anything. I mean, it's so spiky in terms of the emotional building tension that it would almost be impossible for me to spot anything unless it was very large. But I don't have anything in the data sets that are saying nuke attacks, right? We've got all the remote viewers saying that they're seeing mushroom clouds. It might be a commercial explosion. We just don't know. They're really good at that kind of thing, about picking these things up. And I would think that if there was a nuke attack, that they would see the actual form of the attack in the sense of missiles and shit, right? In any event, it doesn't correspond to my data set, so I don't know what to tell you. Maybe there's going to be something that's going to show up. highly unlikely. There's a lot of reasons not to think that that would not be the case. There's only one reason to think that that is the case, and it's a legitimate one. So in devolution, it is necessary that you tell, okay, so in devolution what's happening is your country's been infiltrated and your institutions are captured by outside agencies. You've been attacked by a foreign party, by another government, another country, or something, right? Or a bug in space, right? Whatever it is. And this other entity has taken over your government. You have a Manchurian candidate that's running the governmental structure. It's all captured. The legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch are captured. And a small portion of the military is marginally captured. But the core of the military is not. It's involved in devolution. In devolution, the idea is to remove the populace and the military from the captured institutions, show the populace that these institutions and the are captured, and point out who all of the attackers are in this, okay? Now, while this is going on, the people that are infiltrating, the deep state in this case, and the foreign governments are not sitting there just, having picnics. They're actively continuing their plans. So it is necessary for the people that are running the devolution core to state clearly that they exist and what their response would be to certain conditions. This is necessary. Not only does it conform to the law of war in your actions, but it's also necessary as a practical matter. And so this accounts for that curious statement that came out that got some mainstream media attention, but it sure got attention in China. And this statement came from, we saw it in tweets. I think it came out as a tweet, and then it was on other forms of media. You can go back and look it up. It was back earlier this year, and it said, in the early part of this year, and it said basically that if shit goes down, we may respond first with a nuke. Just that one line, and it didn't say it I'm paraphrasing, all right? They used more formal language to it. And basically they were stating that should contention arise that is combative, that the United States reserves the right to respond instantly with a nuke. In other words, we wouldn't necessarily escalate through our regular routine. We would not try and deal with part of our military and soldiers and shit if it's been captured. We would certainly not deal with the Secretary of State's office, the Foreign Office, any of these kind of things here. We wouldn't deal with the executive branch at all. It may just be that the military would decide to respond with a nuke if shit goes down. So, okay, this is interesting. We have UN troops on continental United States soil. We have Chinese, quote, UN troops on training on United States soil, Wisconsin or Michigan or someplace. Not a big deal, really, in my opinion. But especially now, they're just going to be captives. Anyway, though, so they basically had to tell the Chinese and everybody, we're still here, we've still got control, and this is going to be our response if you guys push shit. They had to do it because the Chinese would, of course, push and push and push until they got just that response. And SOC saw that. The Chinese are operating on the behalf of the powers that be. And so they put out this message to them. The rest of us are all real curious as to, well, what's that mean? What's going on there? And so this is one of the hints, one of the actual not hints. This is a marker to the existence of devolution. The devolution is on and active now, and has been for some time. I think several years. And it takes a long time to plan this shit. It takes a long time to put people in place and get things ready. It takes almost as long doing counterinsurgency as it does the insurgency. And so there's been a lot of activity doing the counterinsurgency devolution part of this. And now we're getting into the active phase of that. And so we've done all of our putting people into boats, getting them fed and shipping them across the ocean, and everybody's had food and they're all rested and they've got their bullets and everybody's sitting around and okay, now it's go time, right? So we're at that point. This is go time here for September, October, November. And so the war is really on. It was really on for years. Most people are just not aware of it, just in the same way that in World War II, there would be long stretches of no real war activity. In the press, we're always trying to gin something up to keep everybody at home, keep their spirits up, and so on, as things were very terrible in that portion of the war where you're just moving your people into ships and getting them fed and stuff, right? There's no satisfaction, there's no progress with that. And so it becomes an issue, maintaining morale and all of these kind of things. In devolution, even more so. But right now, we're at that point where we have the wave starting to crest, and we're going to get a plunging wave. It's not going to be a spilling wave. It's not going to languish. It's a plunging wave, and it's going to plunge over. So we're going to see more and more and more and more and more material pile up and keep coming up and keep coming up. The MSM is just going to be flooded out. So is the powers that be. We're going to see shit popping up about Klaus Schwab, about Bill Gates, about Soros, about any of these people you care to name. We're going to see shit popping up about all the politicals, all the Hillary Clinton, Pelosi, all of these kind of guys. And it's just going to keep going and going and going until the point where you just want to throw up about hearing any more about it. And that's the point. Because it's a battle for hearts and minds, right? And so there's some people that the SOC is not even battling for. These would be the Antifa and the actual people within the organizations themselves. Now, it's true that in order for devolution to proceed well and accurately, there has to be forgiveness. So in war, you have to have the ability to have reconciliation with parts of the enemy. All right, and so the minion class in the enemy, we will see a lot of those guys walk. Not the upper minions, but we'll see lots of some of the lower middle class minions. They'll walk. Now, a bunch of the bottom minions are going to walk because they're going to rat on the guys up above them. This will be particularly true in the audits and the child and human sex trafficking. Right? They'll let a lot of these guys, the workers, say what they know and do some level of minimum recompense, and then they'll just let them go, because this is not the point. The point is for the complete structure of planet Earth to change. So this is why I keep saying sci-fi world, right? We're not ever going back to the old paradigm. This is why the woo is here. This is why we are doing this in the transition into the age of knowledge, the age of Aquarius. It's not enlightenment, it is the age of knowledge. If you can make wisdom and enlightenment out of that, good. But all the universe guarantees you is that it's the age of knowledge. And it's here now. This is that war. So this is the war for good and evil. This is the war in which you will win by knowing how to fall to great advantage, because your opponent will destroy himself, and because it's a psychological warfare, it's knowledge warfare, so it is not brute force, and it is not other aspects of kinetic warfare dominant. It is information dominant, especially now that we're in our age of Aquarius here. This information warfare means that a lot of us are going to get really ugly shit said about us and things done to us, right? So they did a Twitter jail to me yesterday. And this Swede I know, who's a mild-mannered fellow, but he chuckles a lot. They probably don't like that. He got YouTube banned for hours, shadow banning. You just can't log in. They do things that your connection to them, your JavaScript that loads when you load up YouTube or whatever is different. Now, it's different all the time, but because they're always putting in new different kinds of stuff in the JavaScript every time you reconnect. But if you run algorithms, you can monitor the size of these JavaScript loads and patterns and stuff and see which of these various subroutines and libraries are still there or not there. And the JavaScript is quite huge. They don't actually even write it in JavaScript. It's written in Clojure or ClojureScript, which is this high-end Lisp-like language that spits out the JavaScript. Just, man, it's really cool. I like it. I hate programming anymore. It hurts my hands, but JavaScript via ClojureScript is really cool. Because you can generate millions of lines in a few thousand lines of Lisp. Anyway, though, so here we are at the information war, and people are being damaged. It is necessary that people like myself come on out to tell you where we are at so that we can basically keep our morale up as we're going along. And so we have many morale boosters every day. So every day I go out to get a morale booster by going to look at Mars anomalies or any of these other guys who produce YouTube videos about the stuff that they're finding in the Mars photographs or the moon photographs. Bruce Seasall does the moon. He does the UFOs and so on the moon. And so it's nice to have this as an activity. So I structure my falling back, my period of strategic withdrawal by loading myself with this information that, oh, look, here's some more shit that was found on Mars. There's more UFO activity on the moon. These are important for me so that I don't get 100% focused on the shit that's going on here on Earth, because then I wouldn't be able to see humanity for all the human activity. And it's important that we keep a good focus on humanity at the moment, because that's what we're fighting for. We're fighting for the entire species and the entire planet. And it's been too long captured, too long controlled. And we're at that point in universe's progression. Universe is the sum total experience of all humans that have ever lived and ever will live. And so in our progression, we of course have to have change at massive levels intermittently. And here's a change that's going to go and undo 150 years of capture in the Western world, but maybe 2,000 years of capture across the whole planet, and free up humans in a way that we've never ever experienced before. And we just have to go through some small shit to get there. We got to go through the shit with the COVID, and we got to go through the shit with the powers that be and the censorship, and they're trying to be fascists and take over things. And it wears you down, okay? It can really wear you down. I saw that poor Max Egan was a bit depressed the other day about the shit going down in Australia. And I can't blame him, you know. It's a terrible situation to be the test bed for fascism. We have to be creative, in my opinion, but also, you know, Max needs to know that there is indeed stuff going on. I've seen examples, I don't know if it's valid or not, but people have sent me movies from their own experience on overpasses looking at the truckie blockades, and that they've got rolling blockades moving. And you don't see any cars. So they're doing it somewhat effectively in this area. And these films were shot in these last couple of days. And it's, you know, it's growing. And so what we need to communicate to Max and all the others is, and Vinnie Eastwood, you know, totally not able to, I mean, they're huge fascists in New Zealand. He's not able to have any device. He's not able to put his hands on any device that can touch into the internet. That's how paranoid these people are. So the New Zealand government is shitting in their pants over Vinnie Eastwood. I've interviewed with Vinnie. He doesn't scare me worth shit. He's a nice guy. You know, he's a good kid. I like him. But you know, it's laughable, it's ludicrous. So you see how close that we are, that they have to kettle all of the so the MSM is being attacked, and at the same time the counter move from the deep state is to kettle the independents. And so that's funny. So they're kettling The independent media, the alt media. They're putting the Vinnie Eastwoods under house arrest, basically. They're trying to put house arrest on everybody. They don't want you talking to anybody in Australia or New Zealand. You're not supposed to talk to your neighbors or these kind of things. You know, talking spreads the evil virus. And that's where we're at. Now, I know that really we have basically the next 2 years. So from this point forward, so say half of this year, half of 2021, all of 2022, and half of 2023, and we will have a massively huge demographic social change as a result of all the people that will be ill and dying from the shots. And so I know that this is occurring and going to occur, accelerate, and keep moving. This is part of the war in which we're going now, because the deep state wants to kill everybody. They want to reduce the population down to 500 million, which means, you know, basically killing 6.5 billion people. So the changes are here, the dynamism is here. We have to understand that the SOC is doing judo, okay? It's a soft martial art. It's not continually trying to hurt yourself hammering on somebody. It's UKEMI, it's fall back in order to roll to great advantage, and then when you stand up, you're just in perfect advantage to execute that throw. And so the person that's attacking you does not even really understand this. I've been in, as a kid, in like street fights where that works perfectly, right? Where a bigger guy attempting to bully you pushes on you. They always start off pushing. They never come on up and hit you just like that. Usually they don't. Maybe these days. But in my day, they would try and push you, right? And so I would always let them push me, but I would always collapse back and do an UKEMI back roll, and they would take a step forward, and then as I do that back roll, I would stand up, and I would be just right up next to them in a perfect position to grab the arm and then do the over-the-shoulder throw, which is dangerous. You know, you can kill someone that way. That's the thing about Aikido. So the martial arts are really interesting. In China, as soon as Mao came in, they took out all of the lethal moves in Kung Fu. All of the Kung Fu guys were brought in and read the Riot Act as to what they could and couldn't teach. And they no longer taught really any war techniques whatsoever. MacArthur attempted to do that to Japan on behalf of the United States when we took over Japan at the end of World War II. It didn't really take, okay? It only worked for a few years, and then Budo came back. In that period of time, we saw the blossoming of Aikido, because Aikido was a new martial art. It didn't exist prior to World War II, which was the cutoff. All the martial arts that existed prior to World War II were thought of as the martial tradition that elevated Japan to attacking everybody. And so they were put down. Karate and all of these kind of things. Shotokan, Shotokai, Goju, all of these things. A lot of martial arts went underground. I actually had the good fortune to study for 6 months with a Goju master before his death. And he had been underground for years teaching, and had been arrested for teaching his martial art. Because there's nothing but lethal moves. Goju is an interesting martial art. I won't go into it, but very interesting. So anyway, though, so here we are with the martial arts having been neutered, sort of, right? Aikido arose, and Aikido took an interesting philosophic approach as the art of peace. And every single throw in Aikido can be soft and gentle, you know, here, please go down to the floor, or can be quite lethal, can be damaging. You can decide, I'm going to damage this person so they can't get up, but I don't care if they live or die. Or you can do a throw such that you know they will die. Okay, and in fact, Aikido has the dubious reputation of having killed more of its own students in its practice than any other martial art. There was a particular throw called Shionagi, the four-direction throw. And I'm very good at it. I've got a very powerful one. And learning to do it safely is a real art itself. And many Aikido students would be thrown in this throw and die later that day, because the damage can be soft and interesting, so to speak, right? And so you'd get thrown, you'd have maybe a little concussion or something, and feel a little wonky, but then you'd die later, 4 or 5 hours later. There were many people that died wonk, and that was it, right? So it's just a terrible situation with Aikido. And the Aikido federations worked on it in the 60s and 70s, and we ended up with a modified Shionagi. And if you go study with the hard Aikidoists that show you all the lethal aspects, how to think about each of these moves in a lethal way, right? They will show you how to think about Shionagi in an extremely lethal, terrible way. Still, but you can't practice it. But it's okay to practice it in its soft form, because then you know that all you have to do is speed it up and apply a little bit more leverage at this point, and then a little bit more pressure here, and you've got the fatal form. And so, as I say, it's an interesting martial art. Now they're trying to resurrect Kung Fu, and the CCP is putting it down. They don't want them to bring back any of the ability to seriously fight and strategize and think about things. But it's too late. We're in the war now, and the SOC is very practiced in martial arts and very practiced in UKEMI. And their UKEMI arts are very good, and you'll see these over the next month expose more and more and more of the deep state, to the point where you don't even want to think about it. I think you're going to just get sick of it all. It's going to go into the banking system as well. So we're going to have a situation where the banking system is going to take a huge hit. Also in September, actually by October 1. That's the end of the fiscal year here in the United States. The federal government has to do all these different reconciliation things. They won't be able to, because the relationship with the Fed is breaking down, and we're going to get this third quarter prognostication for, or report for hyperinflation, which is going to, so we'll not only have the MSM under attack, the mainstream media, but the banking system will be under attack, in the sense that everybody's going to be looking at it saying, holy fuck, at 40 and 50 and 60% inflation in various different kinds of commodities. And it's going to really be upsetting to the system as a whole, to everybody in the individuals. It's going to raise up the emotional level, emotional tension levels everywhere. So as I was saying earlier, within the morass of stuff that's already pegged for September, I don't have any big giant spikes that would seem to indicate a nuclear explosion. And so maybe one will happen, and maybe my timing on running my routines here just missed it, right? Maybe if I ran it today or something and started looking at it again, maybe I would pick something up. But there's just nothing there in the way of any kind of a precursor language that would suggest that there's going to be nuke attacks. And we do have this curious thing of where there apparently is a deep state mechanism that they're trying to use to influence people's thinking. That is to say, mind control at some form of an electronic version. You can go see my weird warning woo video. It's only about 15 minutes or so, a discussion about that. I've gotten so many emails from this that are confirmatory about it, and descriptors about this that are all lining up from various different places, that I think that indeed this is the case, and that it's not ubiquitous, it's not everywhere. And so it would therefore appear to be a low Earth or ground-based technology, as opposed to space-based and big broads technology. So, and then I wanted to point out one other thing here, just about the explosion and the mushroom cloud stuff. You would have a tendency to get that sort of thing showing up because of the way that the evil part of the battles have polluted our basic mental resources. So you have a scenario where a guy, you can get front loaded. So no point in even thinking about, if you're psychic or whatever, about the nuke explosion, if you've heard about it from the remote viewers, because you're front loaded. Anything you get could be confirmatory or not, could just be a fake because you're front loaded on it. And so at that level, once they came out with it, it's like, okay, there's no point really exploring that aspect of it because our minds are now keyed in on it. It's possible, I think, that the deep state is doing something to create these impressions. It would be to their benefit to do so because they need to keep us in a state of fear. Anything that engenders more and more fear is good for them. And so it's it's feasible. I don't know if it's probable. It's feasible that this could have occurred. We will soon find out. We're into September now, and we'll know as things go along if this is the case, and just exactly what it was that triggered or not the remote viewers to have this image. I'm not particularly worried about it. There isn't anything you can do about it until after the fact anyway. So it's like, okay, I'm still back in here with the battle. I'm not going to be distracted. At this point, we're still dealing with the information war, the banks, the breakdown of the money, and the exposure of the mainstream media. That part will be the most fascinating thing here as we go on in. That, I think, is the SOC's response to the deep states attempting to control the news cycle. So the deep state's going to populate the news cycle with their terror, debacle, Afghanistan, of course, COVID, social justice warrior shit, and the CRT shit, and the cancel shit, and anything they can so that they don't have to respond to audits and the generalized breakdown, the hyperinflation. And so on. Now, the interesting part of this is the news cycle is organized by the news people, and the SOC is attacking the news people with the pedophilia, the trafficking, the ties, the corruption, ties to the politicians, and so on. They're not attempting to get at or displace any of this at this moment, all right? They're not actually altering the news cycle here. They're just bringing out their information and letting it stand there on its own. It won't make it into the news cycle because the news cycle is going to be so crowded with all this other shit. However, the SOC has a tactic and a strategy, or a tactic within their strategy of going after the people that are giving the news. So that you'll get to the point where right now you see Geraldo Rivera and you see him in relation to having sex with Trudeau's wife. Oh, or mother or somebody. Mother, I think. Anyway, somebody related to Trudeau. And so here's this new image in your head, right? And it'll keep going and keep going and keep going. And so you'll see the Clintons come on up, you'll see Podestas, all of these people come on up, and all of these images will be tied into Wolf Blitzer, all of these people that you see on the media, to the point where they dare not show up on the media the same way Trudeau can't walk down the street. And at that point, when the main names start dropping off the MSM, and all of a sudden the favorite show of so-and-so has resigned, or they're redoing it or whatever, and they're filling that time slot with some unknown noob, and you go on and you just don't watch it, then at that point that the mainstream media, the news cycle, is actually eroding. The ability to produce the news cycle is failing. And that failure, of course, is going to bring out even more stuff as we go forward. So we're at this dynamic period. Don't be discouraged. Remember, we're falling back. It looks like you're losing when you're falling back, but you're doing UKEMI. You're rolling to fall to best advantage. It's all planned. It's all known. I got to go, guys. Too much here. I'm trying to make sure that my sound works too, so we'll see. Anyway, live long and prosper. Stay well, stay healthy, stay out of it. We're going to be needed on the other side of it. Once all this shit collapses, the news cycle collapses, then the powers that be start collapsing, we'll all come out and say, okay, let's clean all this shit up and start doing things.